Is the NFL meritocracy a myth? Willie Snead, Ray McCloud, former 49ers wide receivers, bringing up maybe that there was entitlement on the 49ers roster, that they don't have a chance to compete. All that and more coming up on today's Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker at BD Peacock at Crocky209. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We love our everydayers. We love it when you subscribe. Make sure you smash that subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, and my competitive side is a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go now free on the App Store or Google Play. All right, Croc, we were going to go a different direction on today's episode, and we've been breaking down deep dives on 49ers draft picks, looking at the film. We got plenty of time to get into that all the way through the 7th round, plus undrafted free agents. We're going to check in with the NFC West and what the 49ers rivals have done this offseason and throughout the draft. But something came up that we've been getting asked a lot about this weekend, and there were some comments from former 49ers about some roster politics. And I thought it's fascinating. I thought, Croc, it's something we should dive into. You have an idea about that? You were a bottom of the roster player that was trying to compete for a job, and how much more difficult that is for someone in that position versus someone who is a draft pick, period, and let alone a high draft pick in the NFL. And the NFL, Croc, is always thought of as just a true meritocracy. The best player is always going to win and get the job. And we did see a 7th round quarterback win the job over a number 3 overall pick that multiple 1st round picks were spent on. But there's the other side of that as well. And this from Willie Snead this week said, quote, on Twitter, at Willie_Snead4G, said, quote, all I want is to go back.
Before you read Snead's, you talk about Brock Purdy and winning a job, but we also have to go back to like how he won the job. There were people that felt like, oh man, like he's great, he's doing great. Kyle Shanahan was like, man, I think 3rd string is the best quarterback that we have on the roster, right? And even then, he started off as the 3rd string quarterback. He still needed Trey Lance to get hurt, snap his ankle, never come back. He still needed Jimmy Garoppolo to break his foot and never come back, just for him to have the opportunity to compete for a starting job, which obviously once he played, he got to start a job and he kept it, right? But getting to that point of how he even was able to get it, that's what Snead is speaking on. So I would, now you can go ahead and read the tweet, and then we can kind of dive more into it.
It is a good point about Brock Purdy, and John Lynch talked about it, post draft, and he said, he was the 4th guy on the depth chart. He had to beat out a guy that had some guaranteed money at quarterback who was already the number 3 in Nate Sudfeld before he even got to the point where he could compete for a roster spot or the starting job with Jimmy Garoppolo and Trey Lance. And he won the 3rd job over Nate Sudfeld, who was released and ended up signing somewhere else at the end of training camp. So he won that. That was a merit-based win for him. But Kyle Shanahan even said it. He's like, well, look, I think he looks pretty good in practice, but I'm still calling Phillip Rivers or whoever, right? Because I don't know yet. And I'm not going to give him this job. And he wouldn't have taken any snaps if Trey Lance or Jimmy Garoppolo didn't first get hurt. And he had to have enough games to prove to everybody that he was ready to be the guy, that he was that good before they could. It's like, let's say after the Dolphins game for Brock Purdy, if Trey Lance would have been healthy then from the ankle and would have come back, well, Trey Lance would have gotten the job back. As good as Brock Purdy looked in that game. Maybe after the Tampa Bay game, probably one of the veteran quarterbacks. I say veteran for Trey Lance. He didn't hardly play. But they would have probably gotten the job back. Game 3, game 4, at what point, even if healthy, and there's been this talk about Jimmy Garoppolo, could he have actually come back? man, now he wasn't going to put his body on the line to come back in the playoffs because he wasn't going to play anyway. He wasn't going to be the backup to Brock Purdy. You know, how many games did Brock Purdy have to play to where it was okay that the dollars, the contracts, the draft picks spent didn't matter, and he was going to play over those guys? It took a little while. It wasn't just a half a game. It wasn't just 1.5 games. It took a solid stretch of games, and then we really saw that into the next season, and the 49ers were emboldened by how good he played, and then they believed it, and then it was allowed to happen. And even then, it was a very difficult decision for them to make. And I think part of the reason why they sent Trey Lance away is to not have that question even there anymore. I think that was a big part of the Trey Lance trade. But back to Willie Snead. This is what Willie Snead had to say on Twitter this week. Quote, "All I want is to go back to a team that isn't afraid to let guys compete for a roster spot. These last 3 years been nothing short of entitlement. Competition breeds champions." And then also now former 49er Ray McCloud, who has signed with the Atlanta Falcons in the offseason, responding to this from Willie Snead, said, quote, "God always comes through. Finding your people make you realize there was nothing ever wrong with you." And a lot of fans have taken this a lot of different ways from these guys. Neither player brought up the 49ers, but clearly Willie Snead was on the 49ers roster parts of the last 3 years. What did you think when you saw those comments, Croc? And where do you stand on this idea of meritocracy in the NFL?
I think I completely understood exactly what he was saying. And I feel like a lot of people weren't. There were people that kind of threw out the thought of, you know, is he talking about he should be on the field over Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel? I'm like, no, he is not saying that. But I can go back to, you know, myself. And I like to do that sometimes, go back to my Jets days because I was able to see a lot. And there was this guy on the Jets. His name was Darren Walls. All right, Darren Walls, he was out of Notre Dame. He had played with the Atlanta Falcons prior to signing with the Jets, but, you know, late round pick or undrafted guy, signed with the Jets. In the offseason, he's balling. He's making plays, pick six, interception, you know, all these different things. He's getting all the first team reps. You know, I'm like, man, this dude, Darren Walls is cool. Good guy, great guy too. But
he wasn't out playing Eric Crocker, was he?
He was playing better than me. He was making more plays, that's for sure.
Okay.
And you know, he's moving up and he's good. Like, boom, okay, he's doing his thing. He understands stuff. If I have questions, he's helping me. Obviously, Antonio Cromartie, he's on the other side. That's locked up. Well, come April, the New York Jets selected defensive back, 9th overall, by the name of D. Milliner. And D. Milliner came into OTAs and the offseason stuff, and he had a torn like labrum or something like that. He had to get a surgery. Once he was recovered from the surgery, he's good to go, right? Well, no, because he held out for his contract. And he was holding out. He wants guaranteed money, fully guaranteed contract, $12 million, whatever it was. Well, the day he signed in training camp, the day D. Milliner signed that name on the dotted lines, he was a starter. He was the day one starter. Now, was D. Milliner just better than Darren Walls? Well, Darren Walls probably played longer than D. Milliner, and Darren Walls wasn't a 9th overall pick. D. Milliner played 2 years out the league. We have never heard from D. Milliner ever again. And it just goes to show just kind of the thought process. Now, I'm talking about a 9th overall pick, but this is a guy who, no matter what, came in. It didn't matter what Darren Walls did. So when you hear Snead come in and say, hey, I just wanted an opportunity to compete, and there's this sense of entitlement with some of the guys. Doesn't mean he's talking about Deebo and Ayuk, but there were certain guys where he felt like, hey, man, like in training camp and practices, I'm being productive with the reps I'm getting, but y'all not really giving me reps for real. You're not really giving me a true opportunity to compete. Bring up another guy, my guy, Lavelle Hawkins. I coached with Lavelle at Edison. I remember when he signed with the 49ers, and he was told that with signing there, they were looking for like a veteran, and he was going to have a true opportunity to compete for a roster spot. Well, quickly, he realized I have no shot. Like, if you guys are going to just have me a camp body here, why not let me just go? I could have signed with Jacksonville. And that's what he told Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh was like, well, what do you want? What do you want? He's like, oh, let me get on kick return. Let me at least show you I have special teams value. Jim Harbaugh said, all right, I'm going to put you on kickoff return. All right. And we're going to see, Hawk. And what he do? He got the kickoff return and cribbed it. So there are a lot of people that talk about how, oh, they cut him because he took his helmet off. He was turned up because he's like, man, I see what y'all doing. Let me go make some plays. They put him on kick return. He kicked it. He returned the kick for a touchdown, took his helmet off, all that, real 209. And then they still cut him, right? But not because of that, just because of the roster politics. So when Snead says this, it is very true that it goes on. And I believe it goes on in probably every sport. It definitely goes on in football. I think I would expect him to kind of understand that that's what's going on. But I don't think he's wrong for speaking out against it because that is his truth. And it's real. I think when you look at the 49ers roster and you look at all the guys that were in camp last year, you never in a million years thought that Snead had a chance. But not because it's a guy that maybe can't play football. It's like, well, they got Ronnie Bell, they got Danny Gray, they got these guys. They're going to keep these guys over this free agent. And it's just tough when you are a vet, a free agent, and you feel like you're capable of performing at a certain level and you don't truly have an opportunity. You're not getting the reps and you don't have a real opportunity to compete against those guys.
All right, more on this idea of roster meritocracy and roster politics, specifically about the 49ers, how things have played out in recent seasons, and more about what Snead might be talking about and multiple reasons that were working against Willie Snead and have worked against other players on the 49ers roster. And we'll get into some draft chat as well. So get those questions in the chat next. This episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. It's winner take all in the NBA and NHL playoffs, and FanDuel gives you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's right, $150 extra to play with. Bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and a whole lot more. And if you don't want to bet on the NBA or NHL playoffs, that's okay, because you can bet on tons of NFL futures as well. Offensive Rookie of the Year, Ricky Pearsall. Defensive Rookies of the Year. Who's going to win the next Super Bowl? 49ers are currently the odds-on favorite to win the Super Bowl at FanDuel. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, Crack. Looking at the Willie Snead comments, and first of all, I want to say about Willie Snead, and he has every right to feel that way. I think the initial thing that fans do if somebody says something that they feel is a slight toward their team that they root for, start going at them. Oh, well, and they start finding, oh, here's a clip of you dropping a ball. This is why Willie Snead, and so they start going after him. It's like, dude, this is his life. This is what he wants to do. He's an NFL football player. He wants a chance to compete, right? I love that about Willie Snead. I love that about any player. They want an opportunity. They want a chance to compete. And I'm not going to blame anybody for feeling that way, especially if he feels like he, was earning more than he was getting. But there's multiple things that were working against Willie Snead on the 49ers roster specifically. And I don't think he's talking about, I don't think he thought he was going to start over Deebo Samuel or Brandon Ayuk, right? Like that's not what Willie Snead is saying. What Willie Snead's probably saying is, look, I'm a veteran. I know this offense. I know where to be more than this 7th round guy that you just drafted. But guess what? I'm the guy that goes back and forth from the practice squad. I'm a taxi squad player now. And this other guy, it wasn't a 1st round pick. It was a 7th round pick. But he's the one that's going to get the opportunities first because I'm the veteran and I make more and I can be put back on the practice squad, but you don't want to expose this 7th round player. And I think that's a big part of it is, and Ronnie Bell is going to learn this too. Like there was just 2 new draft picks, both drafted higher than Ronnie Bell was last year. It's going to be a lot more difficult for Ronnie Bell to get playing time this year than it was for him last year because of those very roster politics. And as soon as Ronnie Bell isn't on a rookie contract anymore, well, guess what? A team's not going to be worried about exposing him to waivers. And so he might be in that same role that Ray McCloud maybe felt about things, or especially that Willie Snead felt about things. And I think that's one of the biggest things that happens that sometimes fans aren't super aware of, and that probably veteran players know but are just upset about, is that, look, they just drafted a guy and maybe he's not as ready as you, the veteran, but guess what? Willie Snead didn't get claimed on waivers. He's around to be put on the practice squad and brought back. If a different team wanted to sign him and not have him on the practice squad, then he would have had the opportunity to do that somewhere else, and he didn't. And that's the reality, is the situation. If the 49ers go try to put Ronnie Bell through waivers, they might lose him. And they're not worried. They're not worried about if Willie Snead gets picked up. They're worried about, their rookie they just drafted getting claimed off of waivers, and they would lose him. So you just get that automatic bump. And it'll be really interesting to see how things go for Ronnie Bell, because he's going to have to fight for everything he gets now. And he's 1 year ahead of those guys. But guess what? They were drafted a little bit higher. And so if it's a tie, it's going to go to the guy who's got the big money contract. It's going to go to the guy who is has more of the team's resources put into them more recently. It's going to go to the higher draft pick more recently. And that's the way it's going to go. So while it is somewhat of a meritocracy in the NFL, it's not a complete 100% meritocracy. And so I think that's the reality of the situation. And I have no problems with Willie Snead voicing it and being frustrated that maybe he thinks that he beat a guy out and didn't get the shot. Because I think anybody who's played sports in any levels probably felt that way at some point.
I think, my big brother sitting here right now, and my cousin Tyrone Gross, he was an undrafted free agent signed by the Chargers. And I remember when he was with the Chargers, and that was one of the things where, growing up, we just wish, like, man, I just can't imagine being in the NFL. Like, wow, that would be so cool. And then you get there, and he sees guys that were like terrific, like Danian Tomlinson, Michael the Burner Turner, which Michael Turner wasn't a burner, but I don't know why was that even his nickname, and Darren Sproles. And even then, Tyrone is at practice. They end up keeping him on the practice squad, but he felt like, I'm better than Michael Turner. Like, I'm better than these guys. So in the business side of things, that's the part where I feel like we all know and understand, but it doesn't make it any easier for the player that's going through it. That's frustrating for a lot of guys to just understand that no matter what I do, I'm not going to get the same opportunities as this guy. And I'm probably going to need guys to get hurt for me to have the opportunity to play ahead of him. Like Willie Snead needed multiple guys to get hurt for him. So when he talks about, I wish I had the opportunity to compete, he never got opportunity. Not even practice, because he made plays in practice. I remember one of the practices ended with Trey Lance throwing the fade ball to him, and he reaches behind the guy's back and catches it with one hand. Last play practice, like, he made plays in practice, but it didn't matter how many plays he made. And that's where his frustration is, that he's speaking out through these tweets. Ray McCloud, maybe very similar, where he's like, I'm actually on the field. Why are they only using me as a punt returner and kick returner? Why can't I get more opportunities? We saw this with Richie James. Richie James rarely got opportunities for the 49ers. Well, one game they go into on a Monday night against Green Bay, and Kendrick Bourne and Debo and all these guys, they're out because of COVID. The 49ers have to run their offense to Richie James. He has 9 catches, 170 yards, and a touchdown.
Yeah. They're just like, oh, well, we got this Debo game plan. He can't play. Let's give Richie James the Debo game plan. And Richie James is like, hell yeah, let's go. And he put up a Debo stats. It's like, okay. And then where'd he go? Disappeared again.
So that's what these guys are kind of speaking to. A lot of these guys, as professional athletes, feel like they have a certain level of ability that at times is being overlooked because of their roster situation. And it's frustrating for guys. And that is all Willie Snead is speaking on.
The chat just throwing salt in the wounds, reminding everybody that Ricky James is a Super Bowl champion and Kyle Shanahan is not. So, yeah, that's tough. And I'm not going to fault anybody for wanting to compete and being, Willie Snead's at the end of his career, and he sees his opportunity slipping through his fingers. Like, this is his last shot, and if maybe there's one injury here or there, maybe he would have gotten a bigger foothold, been a bigger part of the offense. Maybe if he'd have showed up 1 year sooner, maybe his entire role is the Juwan James or the Juwan Jennings role. Right. But now Juwan Jennings is the guy that's going to have that role. And then when we see new draft picks playing new positions, we'll see what happens with Juwan Jennings and Ronnie Bell. That's just it's the way it's going to go on and on. But clearly in Kyle Shanahan's offense too, and somebody in the chat brought up a Jordan Mason not being able to touch the ball, even though he looks like a pretty darn good runner, right? Well, he's not higher than the other guys on the depth chart. Christian McCaffrey doesn't come out of the game. He doesn't even allow people to. I've never seen a guy coach his own position like the way Christian McCaffrey does. He runs off the field and he tells everybody in the stadium, anybody watching TV, the backup running back, I'm coming off for one play, dude, and I'm coming back on. Like the coach didn't say, hey, come out for one play, now back on. He's letting everybody know, including Kyle Shanahan. He's telling you when he's coming in and out of the game. That's fascinating to me. And so I wonder how hard it is at times for Kyle Shanahan, or if he even wants to, because clearly Kyle Shanahan wants to use the guys he wants to use, and he won't take you off the field if he doesn't have to. Like that's just the way he's coached the team anyway, right? We always talk about I think it was Elijah Mitchell, right? Didn't practice all week, or oh man, Elijah Mitchell's probably not going to play too much. 27 carries,
broken finger, broken ribs, knee banged up. It's like, oh, he's not going to play too much. He goes to the game, 49ers win by 21. He has 30 carries.
It's fascinating stuff. But yeah, roster politics exist. They absolutely do. And there's no getting around it. Sometimes it's a meritocracy. Sometimes there are guys that are able to overcome, but you need some help. And we still, to this day, may have never seen, we're heading into the 2024 season. If Trey Lance doesn't break his ankle, there's a chance we would have still never seen a single regular season snap from Brock Purdy. That may have never happened.
So when we talk about this, right, I bet Brock Purdy would say, "No, dude, like I was better than Trey Lance in practice. Like,
yeah,
I did
get my shot. Yeah, I can't get my shot."
And shut up, you're Mr. Irrelevant. You know, you're Mr. Irrelevant for a reason.
They bring in Sam Darnold, and then Sam Darnold's the 2. It's like, dang man, I swear I'm better than these guys in practice, but we wouldn't have never seen him, and he would have never gotten a shot. Maybe. It would have
been very difficult for him to get a shot.
Especially if Trey Lance started to play a little bit better, right? And I think he would have played if Trey Lance played that whole season instead of getting hurt the first quarter of week 2. I think he would have played well enough to hold off this 7th round rookie quarterback, right? Do you think Trey Lance would have been such a disaster that they would have eventually gone, if you'd never got hurt, that they would have eventually gone to Brock Purdy?
I think what you would have been hoping in that time, in that moment, was that you have a Jordan Love situation where Jordan Love early in the year, everybody said it, right? Like the first half is like, not looking good. Good thing they put him on that contract where it was kind of like a try it type year.
Right.
And then all of a sudden Jordan Love starts cooking and he's getting better and better. And you're like, man, this is a lot different than what we saw early in the year. I thought this guy was just going to get replaced. Then you're kind of scared going into the 49er game. Like, man, there's 2 quarterbacks playing at like the highest level. It's Jordan Love and it's Brock Purdy. And they got to play against each other. And not saying that would have been Lance, but you never know. Lance doesn't even know because he goes to Cowboys and there's like, oh, he went to Cowboys, couldn't even beat out Cooper Rush. It's like, was he ever supposed to beat out Cooper Rush? Like Cooper Rush was their number 2 quarterback. He had been there. He had started the previous season, 4 games, won every start. Mm-hmm. So it was Trey Lance who, without an offseason with the team, was he ever supposed to go to Dallas and overtake him? Now he might have an opportunity this year, but I don't think that was ever supposed to be the case for Lance last year.
Terrible place for Lance to go, by the way, was Dallas. The worst place for him to go.
Minnesota would have been the best. Everybody
or like the New York Giants, just somewhere where there was a chance there was a little crack for him to get through. And there was like 2 brick walls for him to get through in Dallas. All right. Next, let's get into a little bit more of the draft. We actually have a question about that. Jordan Love, Brock Purdy in the chat as well that we will get to next. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by Monopoly Go. All right, game off. Got to pause here to talk a little bit more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. You already talked about that, but there's so much good stuff in this game. You can team up with your friends for timed tournaments on Monopoly Go where you work together, build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. Unique stickers, cool new playing pieces. It's all about the playing pieces with Monopoly. right? And you can taunt your buddies with emojis, hilarious new emojis, and earn all this stuff. But I think maybe the most fun for me is destroying your friends on Monopoly Go, charging them rent on those historic and iconic Monopoly properties, stealing from their vaults, pulling off heists. You can do it all with Monopoly Go. Always something new and fun to discover. So get off the bench and go download it now, free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. All right, Croc. A really quick question here in the chat. If I can find it now, I lost it. This is from 49ers throwback. Brock Purdy or Jordan Love right now, if you could only have one.
Brock Purdy? I know what he looks like with this team. So
I would take Brock Purdy as well.
I'll ask my brother, BJ. Brock Purdy or Jordan Love?
Jordan Love.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a Cowboys fan and a 49ers hater.
Cowboys fan. Known 49er hater.
Yeah. We don't put stock in that. Their best quarterback's number 3 on the depth chart. They don't even know what they're doing over there. Won't give him a chance to earn it. Talk about talking about the ultimate amount of entitlement there with Dak in Dallas. Come on.
Right.
Put Trey Lance in the game.
I'll say this about Jordan Love. How Jordan Love played as he started to peak throughout the year, and you saw what that looked like the second half of the year. Brock Purdy played at that level for pretty much the entirety of a year. So it would be extremely difficult for me, and obviously going back to last year as well. So we've seen such a larger sample size of really good football from Brock Purdy as opposed to Jordan Love, who obviously showed a certain level of ability that was high level, and certain things he started to do. It almost started to feel like and look like they were putting more on his plate with adjustments he was able to make. And I wonder if that would help Brock Purdy take, this offense to another level. But just a larger sample size from Brock that makes me feel much more comfortable about going with him. But it's very clear that Jordan Love is very talented with a lot of things that he's able to do and the way he's able to spin it with the ball. So
the 2 young quarterbacks, that stuff's not done yet. But if you're trying to win a playoff game, I'm going with big game Brock, right? We've seen that proven time and time again with 49ers Packers in the playoffs. Real quick, because I saw this in the chat earlier, and I wanted to ask to wrap up the Willie Snead stuff. Do you feel like the 49ers are doing anybody dirty by any of this, or this is just the way it is in the NFL?
I think you just got to understand the business side of things for the NFL. So I don't think they're doing anyone dirty, but it definitely is unfortunate that that's the way it is. It's unfortunate that for Willie Snead, unfortunate. I don't know how many teams were willing to sign Willie Snead. Sounds like none. So if this is your only opportunity to be on a roster to some extent, then, it is what it is. And they kept him around a little bit, on and off practice squad.
Yeah.
Made a little bit of money, but definitely not the type of contribution that he's looking to make for a team. And he said, man, I've been going through this for 10 years. And he's had opportunities. He's played on a lot of teams. He's played in the NFL for a long time.
Yeah.
But
he
this is so weird.
For a while.
I talked about my guy, Lavelle Hawkins, right, on the 49ers. Lavelle Hawkins on Tennessee, just as bad. He was with Tennessee Titans for 5 years. And they kept drafting these first-round receivers like Kendall Wright, Hunter, Kenny Britt. They just kept drafting these receivers. So he kept getting bumped down. Well, one year, all the guys got hurt. So Lavelle had to play 60 catches, 700 yards or whatever it was. He had a good year. The following year, nope. Like everybody's back. So you're not going to get those kind of opportunities. So it's just tough the way the NFL is. They're going to prioritize the guys that they spend a lot of draft capital on. And unless you really just destroy everything a la Brock Purdy, it is tough and even now Brock Purdy still deals with these certain how people view him because of his draft status. Because he's not a big guy, because he doesn't have a big arm, he's still viewed a certain way by a lot of people.
Yep.
It just doesn't matter for Kyle because, been protected, runs my offense this way. I don't care what you guys are saying.
You trust him, and what you got to get that trust. You get the coach needs to believe in you that you are the guy.
real quick. Somebody in the chat asked, is it true that the Cowboys aren't going to exercise Trey Lance's 5th-year option? They'd be a fool to do that. He'd make too much. And I think Steve-O says it here, $22.4 million. Like, you just can't. So there were a lot of people like, oh, I saw the news drop on Twitter. I didn't even tweet anything out, but I saw a lot of people say, oh, see, the Cowboys aren't even picking up his 5th-year option. Like, they probably literally cannot. It would be for a guy that has played 4 games and you pick up an option that would pay him $22 million. Come on now.
No, there's no chance it was ever going to happen unless all their quarterbacks got hurt last year. And it was the Brock Purdy thing, and he had a chance to play. And then he was awesome for a stretch of 5-6 games. They would have had no chance or no choice to do it. So in this case, they had no choice but to decline it. There's no way they're going to pick up that 5th-year option. One aspect of the Willie Snead thing that because this is a new COVID rule with allowing more players and bigger practice squads and veterans to be on the practice squad. You couldn't be a 10-year veteran and be on the practice squad before COVID. And I wonder if the Players Association might start saying, see, this is not what we meant. We don't meant that we didn't mean for this for you to have some veteran player that you can just yank back and forth off the practice squad and plug him in anytime you want. I wonder if they might roll that back a little bit so that a team that needs a Willie Snead would have to sign them. Now you're on the big roster all year long, right? And your salary is guaranteed instead of the guy who you cut before, because if you make the opening day roster and you are a veteran, then your contract is guaranteed. But they cut him, put him on the practice squad, then bring him back. So the contract's not guaranteed, and then you can yank him back and forth. And I bet some veterans like Willie Snead are probably glad that they have an opportunity in some ways. And some of them are probably like, no, this is kind of abusing this new system. And the 49ers haven't been shy about utilizing, especially at wide receiver, that system and using an extra taxi squad with these veterans. That was never allowed before in the NFL. And I wonder if the Players Association and the league might go back on that new rule that's only been around since the pandemic.
I think if they really want to help the veterans out, make it to where their contract isn't fully guaranteed, so then they can make the initial active roster. And that's a big issue as well.
Take that stipulation off. So, okay, let him make the roster then. Yeah.
And so for those of you who don't know what we're saying, if you're a veteran and at the end of training camp, when you're cutting down to your 53-man roster, if you keep a veteran, let's say Willie Snead, you keep Willie Snead that week and he plays week 1, or he's going to play week 1, his contract for the entire year is fully guaranteed. So no matter what, he's going to make that money. Now, if you release him and then you're able to bring him back after the initial cuts, then he's a week-to-week player. Or you put him on practice squad, which he essentially is kind of week-to-week as well. And the NFL teams, of course, they're smart. They're looking for any loophole or any way to work around,
right?
Either saving money or saving a player that they may potentially like and maybe want to draft and develop or whatever it is. They're going to try to keep those guys around. And you've seen it work. Heck, Stevie Johnson, man. Stevie Johnson was a 7th-round pick. Did not play like the first 2 years. Then all of a sudden, he's this terrific receiver in the NFL for a stretch of years. You do want to try to develop guys. And if you keep these veterans around, like a Snead, you may lose the opportunity to develop one of yours.
Croc, has the rap beef moved you the last few days? Are you into the rap beef? I'm not into the rap beef at all. I find it comical. And to be honest with you, I'm surprised that grown adults are going through this process. This is some schoolyard junior high stuff, in my opinion. But what do you think about the rap beef? Are you enjoying it?
Yeah, so you're talking about the rap beef between Drake and Kendrick Lamar. Well, Drake and Kendrick Lamar and Rick Ross and Metro Boom, all these people. But no, it's been entertaining, man. And I've said I listen to all these guys. I probably listen to Drake more than like Kendrick, but I do like Kendrick. And it's been entertaining. I think the most interesting thing with all of it is everyone has picked a side. So it's like, if you like Drake, then you're rooting for Drake, and everything Drake does is great, and whatever Kendrick does is whack. And if you like Kendrick, then you love everything Kendrick's doing, and he's just murdering Drake, and everything Drake does is trash, and he should never ever respond, and all this stuff. So it has been entertaining for me to just see really the reactions of everybody, but it was good. I hope it goes away now. Both of these guys have made like 4 songs about each other each in the span of like 3 days. and really strategic with how both of them attacked it. It was like Drake dropping multiple songs, and then Kendrick dropped multiple songs, and Drake dropped song, then Kendrick dropped again, and then Kendrick dropped again and made a dance song. It was very, very entertaining for I think a lot of the people that like hip hop.
I mean, this is professional wrestling type stuff too, right? It's like playing the heel, playing the role. You know, you drop the music, all of a sudden you hear the Stone Cold Steve Austin bottle crash. Is like, oh, here comes that new diss track.
I think that's exactly that's exactly how it felt. And if you like Stone Cold Steve Austin, you're rooting for him. If you like a guy who is my favorite, The Rock, then you're rooting for him. And guys pick their sides.
Last one here from Keldrick in the chat. Who should the 49ers groom to be the next Juice? Willis or Guarendo? So 5th round rookie Isaac Guarendo, 6'1", 221, little light in the britches to be Kyle Juszczyk and to be a fullback. Then you have Braden Willis, 7th round tight end, who's got the size but doesn't have quite the athleticism that Kyle Juszczyk had coming into the NFL, more of an H-back tight end type. What do you think? Who should replace Juice, Croc?
I think Willis showed that ability at Oklahoma. And I think we thought that Willis would do a lot of that, and he just didn't. They were really utilizing him as a kind of more of a pure tight end to the point where we saw him get snaps in the Super Bowl. So I would assume that Willis is the guy that if they really wanted to try to work somebody in, it would be him for Juice.
Yeah, it would have to be someone that could purely lead block too, which is still the most important thing that Kyle Juszczyk does. It's just that he can do other things while he's on the field, and he's not just a battering ram. So in that way, I could see Guarendo or Willis being part of that. And Guarendo is a bigger running back, and he does have the ability to catch the football. So maybe that's a role that, you put 10 more pounds on him. Can he grow a little bit more and do something like that? Is he is that good of a run blocker? Could he be a fullback? Because you have to be a pure fullback to be Kyle Juszczyk. And I'm not sure that either one of these guys fits that role. Croc, to be honest with you, there's so few guys that have Kyle Juszczyk's skill set, which is why Kyle Shanahan identified him and paid him twice as much as any other fullback in the NFL, that the replacement, in my opinion, for Kyle Juszczyk should be Jacob Cowing. Put 3 stinking wide receivers on the field and throw the football, right?
That's what the Los Angeles Rams came out and did. A lot of 11 personnel said, hey, forget this. Our main guy, Cooper Kupp, he's going to be on the field all the time, slot receiver. He's going to block a lot, which I remember Cooper Kupp's rookie year trying to block K'Waun Williams, and K'Waun Williams just threw him out the way. Like, get out the way. Obviously, since then, Cooper Kupp has hit his stride, dealt with some injuries, but 11 personnel is the way that they chose to run their offense. I think Kyle Shanahan can definitely cook up a version of that, but I just don't think he wants to throw the ball that much.
Yeah. So I think to be honest with you, maybe it's Juwan Jennings. So you got that bigger slot. And then when you want to have a quicker slot, you go to the pure slot wide receiver, you go Cowing. This year, maybe this is the transitional year with Debo and Ayuk on the outside, and he has a 1st round wide receiver that he needs to get on the field. Maybe that'll be the catalyst for Kyle to see that he has to put, another receiver on the field instead of a fullback or a second tight end. Or we might see some doghouse, and we might see, again, that's what we talked about during the live draft. Remember, it's like, okay, if you're not going to trade Debo or Ayuk, what amount of targets are free? Because you still have Juwan Jennings as well. Well, the amount of targets that have opened in the offseason were Ray McCloud's 14 catches. And I don't think Ricky Pearsall, I think every fan and everybody listening to this podcast would be pretty frustrated and upset that Ricky Pearsall had 14 catches as a 1st round rookie wide receiver, right? And so Kyle's got to throw the ball more than he did before, or someone else is going to lose playing time. Yeah. One of those two things has to happen.
I'd say that what they could have did went with Jaheim Bell out of Florida State.
Yeah, he would have been a player that fit that role for sure. A little more athletic, a little more after the catch than Braden Willis potentially. Yeah,
but still had that size. Had a bunch of rushes, one of those years. So guy that's kind of a do-it-all thing. Hey, quickly before we get out of here, I definitely want to talk about this thing that's going on in the Bay Area, man. They're breaking into cars left and right. They hit my wife's car when I was at my daughter's track meet. And you guys out there in the Bay Area, I know obviously a huge portion of our listenership is from there. that stuff is just terrible. And it's crazy because my brother and I, we were kind of worried about it when we were parking the car. And even then, in a parking garage, in the wide open, they still broke through my wife's window, took one of my backpacks, which only had a change of clothes in there because it was raining Saturday. But it's just unfortunate that people going to the Bay Area, visiting San Francisco or the East Bay, we were in Berkeley, have to deal with something that's going on so often.
Yeah, I mean, it's get a life, first of all, folks. But it's like, man, come on, you can't let your citizens get broken into like that. Now, there's a lot of great things about the Bay Area, and I think some of it's overblown. But one of the things that's not overblown is how often cars are getting broken into. It's kind of crazy. Yeah. Diss track, Croc. I smell a diss track coming from Crocky.
Well, we got a diss track here. It says Juwan Jennings should be an outside receiver, Pierce on the slot. I don't think Juwan Jennings is an outside receiver because it's hard for him to threaten teams vertically. They would just squat on all of his routes. So he's definitely more effective as a big slot.
Yeah, and any Debo trade, he talks about trading Debo for a third or fourth. That doesn't help you. You can still get a third or fourth for Debo next year, but you get a whole season of Debo first. That's the way to play this thing. Debo next offseason. We'll think about that. Thanks, everybody, for joining us live. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure you subscribe. We appreciate you. We love you. And Croc and I will be back tomorrow right here, Locked On 49ers.